have gone astray. Bring them back. Love them enough that they will trust you with their life for the future. Bless us today as we look back in history and see what happened to bring us to this place. We enjoy hearing from these different men why they preach. Help us to learn from their struggles and to learn from each other how we can better teach other men and women to become your workers. We thank you for what we've experienced. Use us for good this whole day. We praise you and thank you for your gift of Jesus Christ. Help us to share that gift best way possible to all the people we meet, especially the deaf community. In the name of Jesus, we pray these blessings. Amen. Why I preach? I must answer some questions first. Why was Joseph sent to Egypt? Sold. Why? We know his brothers are mean. Is that right? Or his father was too, and him chose him because he loved Rachel the most, right? Yeah. Maybe he liked to boast his dreams, and he dreamed his brothers would bow to him, and his mother and father about him. So that's why he was there. We all explain that story that way. What's the real reason? God's providence. And we know when we read the last part of Genesis, when Joseph is near death, well, he's there and his brothers come in and they're afraid of why they're there. And Joseph says, I know you hated me. I know you want to kill me. Don't be afraid of me. I know now why I'm here. God put me here so I could save you. He went to jail when he was 13 years old. He was there separated from mom and dad and all of his family for 17 years. How you feel when you're 13, up to 30. Now he has his own wife, and then the brothers come. He had the power to kill them all, but he was loving God so much he knew why he was there. God's providence. Why was Moses raised in the Egyptian palace with the Pharaoh? Many answers again. Humans could answer many, many different ways. It depends on who you ask. Mother and father, we don't want to kill our baby. Soldiers would, the mother. Then a woman found, happened to live in the house of the king. Oh, a woman's not going to hurt a baby. Soldiers will, but not a woman. Well, are we thankful for women's nature of loving children? That's why Moses was saved. But real answer is God's providence. Is that right? God needed Moses to be there. He needed him to raise it. He needed to have that education. He needed to know about Egypt and how he could challenge. And then God put him in the mountains for 40 years so he could learn about how to take care of sheep, how to find water, how to read the stars. He knew everywhere about that area. Made him a good leader across the desert time. Well, many human answers to that question, but God said his providence, he had to be there so he could lead the people out of Egypt. Why did Esther become queen? Answer, of course. Why? She's beautiful. Mordecai, big part of it. Haman, big part. Mordecai supported God and helped the king save his life. Haman was jealous and set up how they could kill all the Jews. That all stories in there. Why did Esther become the queen? The real reason you find and you read it. God's providence. We needed a woman with powerful influence over the leader of the country, or all the Jews, people would have been destroyed. But there's a woman there. Then the king honored her and then gave Mordecai the power for the Jews to defend themselves. And that led to God's story being ended, being able to still come back and still keep Jesus' future in God's plan. Why was Saul trained under Gamaliel? The other 12 were fishermen, good men, but they needed someone as an apostle who knew the Old Testament. And when he saw Christ, he read the Old Testament different than he ever read it before. Now he could see Jesus in every page in the Old Testament. God's providence made Saul being trained by the best teacher of that day. So when it's time for someone to write, Paul wrote much of the New Testament and helped us to understand much about Jesus in all our life. By now, you should know the answer. Why was Saul there? What's the answer? God's providence, my sign. And together. When I came to this school, I remember Klein Payton. You've heard his name often, the director of this school for over 30 years. He always asked the freshmen coming in, do you see God's providence in your life? I think that's what we're seeing from these stories, why I preach. Every man has a little different story because we're all different, aren't we, Billy? We all grew up differently. But we see how it all blends together. Why do I preach? 3 words. My family. Education that was given to me. And special people that came into my life. They all. And that's why I preach. Let's first look at my family. A grandma. Billy had a story about a grandma. Wow. This woman you don't know, her name is Myrnie Lewis, but she lived in Kentucky. My family had moved to Chicago, and they'd gone to a Baptist church, and she called and said, I found where the Church of Christ is. It's over there, Cornell Avenue, Church of Christ. My mother and father, began to go into that church that my grandmother learned was really the true teaching church, a New Testament church. So that phone call changed my future. I was maybe 5 or 6, I don't remember. But the family began going to that church. My parents, loving people. My dad, 6th grade education. Mom, 1 year in college, could teach school for a short time. But they went to that church every Sunday. Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. That little church fed me. They had good Bible classes. I'm hearing, so I benefited. Billy had to read it for himself, but I was blessed with ears and eyes, and I could see and hear what the preachers were saying, what the teachers were teaching, and I enjoyed it. Maybe 5, 6, 7. Continued on. That church was had strong leadership. See that name? You don't know. His name is Harding McCaleb. His father, missionary to Japan. And his son is their song leader in our church there. Great elders. I remember the elder saying, we do this because, and he would read the scriptures. We do this because, and he showed the Bible. And I remember as a boy hearing elders lead like that. They loved the people. It was a strong, small church, big city Chicago, but this small church, 200-300 people, good leadership, friendly, warm, singing, preaching, Bible studies. The result, March 1st, 1942, Bob, 11 years old, not at a camp, not because they saw many young people. No, I'd been there, been taught. Mom, I need to be baptized. Your decision. Next Sunday again, Mom, I need to go. I know I need to be baptized. So I went forward. That was 42, March 1st. Sometimes I try to think. I think I've missed church less than 10 times since that time. That's 72 years. Live in Chicago, rain, snow, ice, freezing, sickness. I never miss. But not only on Sunday morning, Bible study, preaching, Sunday night, and then Wednesday night. When I was old enough, I was driving myself. We said my father's car, if he turned it on and everybody sat back, the car would go to church. But it went to church with me, my family, and with people sitting in our laps. My aunt, children, always full. It's like a circus car. Open the door, everybody piled out. And it's funny, I still drive people to church all the time. We learned that. My dad was not a spokesperson. I remember I was in college and went home, and on a Wednesday night, I believe it was, I asked my dad to lead a prayer. I remember I holding the pew, and he was holding it. It was shaking like that, and his voice, he led the first prayer. By years later, he finally became a deacon and became able to lead Lord's Supper in a beautiful way, a great visitor. If you need work done in the church, he's always there. But he cannot preach and not teach the Bible. But he taught through his life. But education. I never dreamed of going to college. Nobody, my family's in college. But in the elderly church, my mom and dad says, I'm taking my son to college. You need to send Bob to Harding. My mom and dad, I went to college. Went to Harding College, now a university. Got a BA. I did not plan to preach, but I majored in Bible. I took Greek and Hebrew every morning for 3 years. Whew. So I got my BA in Bible and biblical languages. I remember one professor, B. West, saying, you need to teach Hebrew. I said, I need to teach deaf people, but that's another story. I got my BA. Good teachers, Brother Maddox. I studied church history and have notes from college days. Now it's all in a book called The Eternal Kingdom. This Maddox came and started LCU over here. My notes in my writing, and now I bought his book. I can read and teach the deaf about the eternal kingdom. J.D. Bales, great debater. You don't want to argue with him. He read everything, and everybody loved that teacher. I sat on that. Burke, you don't know. He's a little humble teacher of Greek. Hollis loved him. I loved him. Everybody studied Greek loved him. George Benson, president of Harding, very strong political man, influenced Republican view, the work ethic, and many businesses came and studied at that college. It made me able to think and read about politics. The first Republican in our family, first one to think differently from the Democratic Party view. Got that influence there. Finally went back, got that master's program that started in 1952. You know, I graduated in 53. The MA program began in 52. So after graduation, I think I'll stay and get the master's. So I stayed a year and a half. In the master's program, who you meet? W.B. West, one of the first two men in the Church of Christ that got a PhD and stayed in the church. And I studied under his feet. I studied under Jack Lewis, a scholar in Hebrew. He's from the East, and he taught Hebrew. And I was able to, he taught minor prophets. I love the Old Testament, but that class on minor prophets prepared me to understand all the Bible. Wow, that education was precious, precious. The college had lectureships, and as a student, I went to every lecture and took notes on every lecture. I learned the best preachers in all the world right there at Harding every year. Black and white preachers, good men, influenced me. I met two beautiful women there. My first wife named Cora Payne. She married me and was humble and followed me in every place I went. We had 3 good children together. You can't be a preacher without a wife that supports you, with a wife that welcomes people into the house, without a wife that loves the people you work with, even though they may be deaf. My wife died at 90, cancer. A young, pretty girl came here, a widow lady. We graduated the same year, named Louise. And now we've been married 20 years. Hard to believe. But since I've been here, but I met both my wives from Harding. You think that's important to me, important to my work? But now, the third one, we've seen my family, that influence. We've seen education that God gave. Help me to think, help me to read, help me to know, and help me to understand why I'm here. But that's not why I preach. Never talked about him yet. See, while I was enjoying my family, I had a brother sitting next to me that was deaf. He was not like Billy. He couldn't read. My parents were told by doctors and educators, if you sign, you will never talk. Don't sign. So Dad can't sign. Mom can't sign. Sister can't sign. A brother, I have to talk to him some way. And so we would invent stories. How do you say store? Big sack, you can put a lot of groceries in one sack. Back a long time ago, now it'd be $10 more, maybe like that. But that was a store. Boy, how can you talk about tomorrow? That's tomorrow. What about the day after tomorrow? Easy. Okay. And so that was our language. I was the interpreter when he talked to Mom. I was the interpreter, he talked to Dad. I was the interpreter, he talked to his sisters, aunts and uncles and grandparents. At church, He sat, heard no prayers, heard no songs, heard no teaching, no Bible class. At school, he was fully deaf. They put a hearing aid, big box on him when he was 3. And he walked home when he was 4. On the way home, man, what are you doing? You're supposed to be in school. Took him back to school. And he had teachers talking to him for 14 years. Go get a job. And so he went out and supported himself the rest of his life. 17, began working. Then I go into college. He has a nice car from his working. But I'm in college, no car. But I got the education. He got nothing. I'm in college now, 1949. Oh, excuse me. There's the special person. He's sitting right there. Sam Roach. Sam was a freshman that year. He'd gone to Gallaudet before. He came back to Harding, and we had a class called Personal Evangelism class. How do you teach people about Jesus? And Sam said, I would like to teach the sign language. Yeah. I want to learn sign language. Why was Sam there in 1949? Why did I have a deaf brother? And I went to school, and he wanted to teach sign language. Why? Could it be? Could that be why? My brother asked me, why am I deaf? Nobody in the family deaf. I met Sam and learned signs. He lived off, and I lived on the campus, so I had more friends on the campus. We began sign language classes. And every year since that time, Harding, as far as I know, still over 60 years, they have a sign language class. Sam wanted to teach. One man answered, and through the years. The second special person in my life that influenced me to preach was Hollis, because he stumbled into my room one night, learned the sign language. Fantastic mind. Can't read, but he can't forget anything. Everything he hears, he can beat you in remembering it. Other people read and study for exam. He listened to them ask questions to each other. He'd go and make an A because he could hear and remember what he heard. Hollis learned the signs, and you've seen his skills through the years. He began there in the college, working together. He, no deafness in his family, went to Indianapolis and started a church from scratch, nothing. He had some people there. They were signing. They needed someone to teach. And Hollis and Ernestine moved there for $80 a week and began the church from nothing up to 45, he said yesterday, his talk. And I like to say, he said, $80 is not enough. I need 100. And the elder. So Hollis moved to Louisville, Kentucky. He has a better story than that, but that's the way I remembered it. And then he recommended me to Indianapolis. I was working on my master's. I was finishing there in 58. He moved, and they called me. I went there, and they gave me $100 a week plus a new house to live in. They bought a house for $12,500. My wife was expecting, and we began to work in Indianapolis, Indiana. Change. That's my first preaching job. We went to Little Rock every Sunday while I was in college, and I met many deaf people there and began to change my life and practice. But support preacher, I never looked for that job. They called me. I went. I remember preaching for 6 months, baptized no one. But Leander Moore had planned to come to that church for a gospel meeting. We worked hard, advertised, And in 2 weeks, 30 people were baptized into Jesus Christ. The church, wow. And we were running now. Running. He recommended me to Maywood, California. Why? Hollis was always going everywhere. Hollis went to California, preached there, excitement there. He came back, I'll preach again next year, okay? But then Ernestine became pregnant. It's time delivery. And he said, Bob, I can't go. Would you go to your church? So I went to Maywood for a gospel meeting in 61. And then they asked me to move from Indianapolis. Church was there, strong. So I accepted and moved to California. Thanks, Hollis. 20 years I'm in California, and Hollis said, you need to help me here, help me here, help me here. I said, work is good. I enjoy this work. I love it. It's growing there. Slower. But I love the church in California. So that leads me to the next special people I began to meet. Named one already, that Leander Moore. You've heard his name from Billy. I call the three big preachers in my life that influenced me a lot. Leander was one. He was a storyteller. He could explain charts and hearing audience as well as the deaf. The drawings, big. Oh, it's so clear. The deaf can preach like no other people. They know how to use the face, use their body language. At that time, Leander was wonderful storyteller. Easy for people to respond. We had another preacher, very different. Gordon. I saw him as not the best preacher in the world, but every time a person asked a question, another question, Gordon was that way. Just very different. The deaf loved him. When I moved, Gordon went to the north. His wife did not like the north. She never unpacked. They stayed there 1 year and gave up. But the church, McRae and others have kept it going through these years. Third one, you know who? Moore and Gordon. Who's the third one? Fire in his bones. He cannot stop preaching. Oh, Lloyd. Those three different preachers, different characters, all different. But Lloyd, fire. I better go now because Jesus is coming tomorrow. He would preach all over the world. Of course, Lloyd needed good interpreters with him, and he brought Gladys and every good interpreter he could find, and they traveled all over the world. That was Lloyd. Most of you may not know this man. He's a hearing man, Ben Holland, PhD, Austin, Texas, very skilled in visual work. He was married to Gladys from a deaf family. She's experienced signer and very, very good. They taught in the Church of Christ right near the deaf school in Austin. Deaf school right there. This is the church right there. Many of you maybe have been in that house. I'm sorry that a few years ago they sold it. Sorry about that, but that has influenced many, many, many people. He had a dream. He said, we need a workshop. They began some things, but I'm going to jump to some fruit from this work. What did these works produce? Why am I still preaching after all this time? 58 till now, full-time, supported by good people to preach to the deaf people, to train deaf preachers. Why keep them going? But Indianapolis Church, when I left, we had 70 active members every Sunday. 30 others are baptized but not doing much. We had over 100 members, but really 70. 7 deaf men could preach. 7 in that one church. One sitting here. We talked about the other one, Arthur Wilson, and they're just good. Gene Greasy, his wife, is here. 4 others have died, but they're all a very good preacher. Well, Bob Short was still alive in California. I wish he could be here. He would love to see you all. That was the 4 men out of that church, and they continue to do other things. But when you notice this name, I had this name on my list before I heard Rex talk about him last night. But Arthur Wilson. First, he learned in Columbus, Indiana. Then he came here to school. He went to Bakersfield. He came back. But that's not the point. Arthur and Nancy have some children. Dennis. I'm looking for someone to help me here. Hollis retired. Dennis, maybe I can help. I didn't know Dennis. If I had to choose, I told this to Dennis too. I said, I would choose your brother more. I thought he was more to the deaf. I thought you were more to hearing people. I didn't know, but we needed him. He said, I'm willing. I introduced him to the bosses here, and let's try. The first time I saw him teaching the class, I walked by, looked in. That's not a hearing person teaching. That's a deaf man teaching the deaf. Dennis teaches exactly like a deaf man. He's deaf in his heart. I didn't see that before. And you've seen the result of this workshop. The elder said, Bob, you cannot. Too much. You're too old. If you let Dennis be the director, you can have a workshop. I said, thank you. Dennis said, oh. He's worked himself into the grave almost. He really has perspired, really has worked, really has thought. Everything, his work. I hope you hug him and thank him for what you're benefiting. Because Dennis really worked. And his wife, she's always behind the scenes. She's been working, getting here at 6 in the morning in the kitchen, still working down there. Her daughter's still working down there. While you and I sit, listen to lectures, his wife and daughter. But that's not why I talked about this. Look at this. He has 2 children now in the mission field. 2 already. What do I call that? 4th generation. Bob, Arthur, Dennis, and his 2 children. 4 generations of people preaching Christ. Are you important? Am I important? We influence people. We don't know how. But God uses it all for his work if we allow him to use us. We just have to do our little bit. As weak as it is, but God uses all of us. We look around. Some of us are not very beautiful. Some of us are not very smart. All of us are very usable by God. He uses all of us with our weaknesses, with our mistakes, with our sin, with our failures. If we love him and put ourselves and we go forward, God blesses it and grows the church, grows his kingdom. And we look back. Now I see why this happened. Now I see why I have a deaf brother. Now I see why God blessed me with a family that loved Jesus and going to church. I see why now he brought into my life beautiful women that are patient and willing to do their best to work with the deaf, even though they are not stand-up interpreters. Their hearts were open to the deaf in their home all the time. Wow. I can see my life in the providence. 4 generations. That's why I preach when I see the people that have changed my life and see what's happened in their life. That makes me, I need to teach others. I love teaching the Bible to anyone that wants to hear it. And it's beautiful when you open up and you explain, they say, I never saw that before. I need to be baptized. And they say, thank you. Thank you. They feel clean. And all I did was explain the Bible. And I see their lives change. That's enough. I think when a woman has a baby, her life changes forever. I guess the closest thing for a man is when they can lead a person to become a Christian. And you want to see them grow. You want to see them walk. You want to see them run. You want to see them teach. When I see some of the people I help teach, when I see them preach, it's worth everything. That's why you preach. Mike is another Wilson. Note he's on the program. I haven't seen him today, but he's here. If I was going to choose, I would choose Mike to be here. But Dennis showed up the right time, the right place, and he's here. Mike's heart, I thought, for mission, I thought more than Dennis. But I see God wanted Dennis here. He's the one that can't do this work. And so I see the providence in that. Here he is, Clayton. He's one of the 7 men that I felt became a good preacher there. He's as old as I am. He's still preaching to the deaf. He not only preaches in Indianapolis, but he goes to every deaf camp. He goes to Tennessee, then he drives to Oklahoma. He pays his own way every time. So if you need any help, money, he must have all the money. He's able to give all of his life. Wow. And they have beautiful women with them. We don't hear much about Mary. He can't be good without her. He just cannot. We didn't hear too much about Nancy until Arthur died. Now they talk about Nancy all the time. Christine helped us remember Gene. We just laugh at Gene's ability to do things. He's so different as a preacher. Very humble preacher. Very beautiful preacher. Well, you don't know this man. Some do. His wife was in Arkansas in the deaf school there. I knew her. Sam taught her the Bible. She became a Christian, a believer in Christ through Sam's preaching in Little Rock, Arkansas. Wilson is a hard of hearing, smart man, no signs, in Ohio. My aunt was going through Ohio and met this deaf man. He gave me his name, and I got the name. I gave it to Yvonne, and she said, hearing. Bob said his deaf brother can't read and write. He gave me a name of another person that can't read and write. I'm not interested. But then my aunt, did you give that name to that girl? What? Second time. You need to write, Yvonne. Okay, so she wrote. They got married. And they live in Akron, Ohio. And beautiful people. Sad they just lost their oldest son this past month. He was only in his 40s. They're weeping now. We need to encourage them. But they were very interested in helping the deaf in Akron, Ohio. We've had workshops. We've had gospel meetings there in Ohio. I think that was the beginning. And one of the things, Mac Ray has gone back and forth and taught there many times in Ohio. So the church in Indianapolis kind of began to spread out. Where was the first deaf camp? Well, think about a man named Gary Blake. He's another one that came into our colleges, and he began to dream. He said, we need a deaf camp. Never heard of one before. The idea for a camp began in Searcy, Arkansas. With the hearing man, they began experience with camps. Gary is there. He said, we need one for the deaf. And it began there. 2 weeks. Who thought of that? Gary Blake. Why was he there in Arkansas? He married a girl who had deafness in her family. And he went there to learn. And he studied about deaf ed. He became a professional teacher of the deaf. And when they wanted to begin a deaf school in Africa, Ethiopia, he went there to help. And he was there for 6 months. He wanted more control because he knew about deafness. The people there were control. But he helped begin the deaf school in Ethiopia. If Bob had no deaf brother, maybe Hollis would not have learned the sign language. Maybe Gary Blake would not have shown up. Maybe would not have any deaf camps. You begin to subtract. Billy would never have met Marilyn if you go back. Because Bob has a deaf brother, then this. You begin to see our lives intermingle in each other. We say, what is God doing? You mean we have a part of God's plan? Every Christian, it doesn't matter the nose, the hair, the finger, or the toe, or the big mouth, or the beautiful hands, or now, beautiful feet of people that carry the gospel. I wish every hearing person, every deaf person could have heard that lesson last night. It was worth the workshop. You and I experienced something wonderful. That's how you influence everybody. Ethiopia. That story should be in the book of Acts. If you're writing the book of Acts today, they would have that story there. That country changed. It started under communism. Communism there. And it came in. The Church of Christ was there because the government needed someone to do something. Someone invented the idea of, we'll begin a deaf school. And so that led the hearing church to go. They have 5 full-time deaf schools, I think, in the whole country, all led by members of the church. Because of that work, the hearing church, they saved over 200,000 lives. When people were starving, Church of Christ bringing in food, even the Catholic Church gave us money to give to people during that time. We saved many, many lives because they had a deaf work. Why'd they think about a deaf school there? People who knew deafness, and that was something. And it's just spread to the world. And now Africa probably has more Christians than America. I don't know. They're growing very fast over there. More churches anyway. But that small church in Indianapolis influenced Kokomo to the north, Columbus to the south. But I also went to Ohio, and even from there went to West Virginia and preached the gospel. And Hollis went on to Louisville, and I influenced a church in Chicago where my brother was. He finally was in, they had a small church there. People that come to our workshop and learn. So that church, your congregation, wherever we work, it influenced all the people around it. First National Deaf Workshop began in Austin, Texas. I have the book over there. I'll show it to you afterwards. You want to look at the first one? I have a copy of all the speeches, who was there, what they talked about, what they said. Still have it. Show it to you after a while. That's what happened in Indianapolis. But I didn't stay in Indianapolis. I was there 4 years. But then I moved to California. How did that change me? California? Crazy people in California. But I went there. And every church has to have a Bob Johnson, and Lois is a black man who used his mouth. The one thing, his mouth had nothing to do with what he was signing with his hands. But he used his mouth all the time because oral, you have to use your mouth. But he didn't know the words, so no connection. I love that man. He studied the Bible. If I had to leave, he could preach. If I had to be out of town, he could teach. Lois, and I thought if we stayed too long, my children would marry their children because we were just together so much. We were just good friends. Bob is going to be with the Lord now, and Lois is very sick and wanted to be here. She's mad with her family because they would not bring her here, but she's very invalid, hard to move, and but she's very upset because she feels like she's in jail, cannot be here at the national workshop, and they want to go to a hearing workshop. And they could drive and they could be there, and she, hearing people control deaf people's lives, she's so angry with her sister who has saved her life and serves her very, very well. But right now, angry because she missed the National Deaf Workshop. Bless her heart. You can't work any place without other help. No one can teach the deaf alone. You have to have many people around you who love you and help you and are willing. This young man and woman, they just like a brother to me in California. They learn the signs, and if I needed a hearing person to help me, if like a marriage or a death, Owen would rush in and help with that work when I'm out of town, going to California or a gospel meeting or something like that. When I went to Chicago, my home is in Chicago, vacation every 2 years, all the way to Chicago to be with my family. While there in Maywood, there's some deaf people down in Long Beach. So I live next door to the church, walk. I get up and drive the 30 miles to Long Beach and pick up deaf people and bring them to church every Sunday. They stay with us till the night, and then we bring them back to Long Beach. It's only 30 miles that way and 30 miles back. That we did many years. Finally, that church was established in Long Beach. They grew. Finally, we brought them in, and they would drive themselves in, and so pretty good. We spread out to Torrance. There they had young people. Whew. Some good young people. And I go there. They wanted to study the book of Revelation. I said, you need to know a lot of the Bible before you study Revelation. We began teaching. They said, oh, enough. Okay, we understand now. I taught Revelation to the people in Torrance, young people. Every church has special people in it. This is Tina Moorhead. I like to use her name often because after we moved here, this little woman would send me money at Christmas time or at Thanksgiving time. Bob, I know you would invite people to your house for Thanksgiving. $25, buy a turkey, invite some deaf. She was earning maybe $200 or $300 a month on Social Security, giving me money to help the deaf people here. Her son is now preaching in the church in Maywood that supported me for 20 years. So again, generation, because Tina lived in Long Beach. I'll go down and teaching her, and she learned the signs. Or she learned about Christ. She said, teach my son, baptize my son. I said, well, I need to study with them first. So I went to their house, and I was teaching this 10, 11-year-old boy, teaching him. I didn't know there was an old man, 72, in the other room, listening to everything. That was Tina's hearing husband. She was a second wife, and David was their baby between the two of them. So I'm teaching David. He said, I want to be baptized. Fine. And the father said, I want to be baptized too. On the same day, I baptized a man that was 72 and a son that was 11. What's the difference? Hallelujah. The 72-year-old man never taught his mother and father, never taught his brothers, never taught his first wife. Why? He's 72. Really, he only went to church a few times. About 3 months later, he passed away. Was he saved? Of course. But his friends, his family, the people no opportunity. But David, the boy, 11, boy, he's taught everybody. He's taught his wife, he's taught his children, he's taught cousins, he's taught aunts and uncles, and now he's preaching. He's been preaching all of his life in California to people in the inner city. He worked with low people, and now he's back to the home church preaching. That church still supports me here. Why do you preach? Because what happens to people? Their hearts change. They become lovers of God, and they serve in different ways, and you cannot stop. You cannot stop. You need to find another David, another father that's old and ready to die. You just love teaching people. You don't know this man. He has a deaf brother in Kentucky that died, but he felt a burden. This man lived in Los Angeles. He heard about my preaching to the deaf. He owned apartment buildings in the middle of L.A. Because of his deaf brother, he would rent these to deaf people first. So deaf there, deaf there, deaf there. No other deaf wanted. Then a hearing, he'd rent it to them. But now he come to church. They're not interested. And so he called me. He said, can you come and teach a Bible class to them? Of course. So he set up a Thursday night Bible class in one of the apartments. I remember going in the first night, and we sat around the table, and there was a wine bottle right in the middle of the table. And the man who was there, he said, what do you think about that? I said, it's your house. And we went on, and I taught the Bible. I taught the Bible there in that apartment exactly like I teach it in a church house. Except this one, I call it the convict class. This man that had the wine, he's out of jail. When I talk about any sin, thievery, fighting, jail, they would point fingers at each other. If you talk about adultery or any sin, everybody in that class, they even spoke during the class. When I go home, I take my clothes off and leave them outside. It takes a week for my car to get rid of the smoke. You remember John Pease? John Pease? With me to that class. And we just taught the Bible. And they would sit there and respond. And one girl, I remember one night, says, oh, I want to be baptized. I looked in the eyes. The first time you come to church, your eyes are clear and you're dressed nice. I will baptize you. And it went on a few weeks. Again, she came to that class. Bob, will you baptize? When your eyes are clear and I know you're thinking right, I'll baptize you. Come to church. One Sunday, looked like a different woman. She came dressed nice. Eyes are clear. Do you believe? Yes, I believe, Jesus. Wow. Baptized her into Christ that morning. I was so happy. I had to take her home. Go back to the same place. I can't let her live with me. I can't afford that. But I hated to drop her off. because you're right back in the same area, the same temptation, the same people. A month or two later, I read in the newspaper a fire, and that woman died in a fire there. Austin Offhill, he finally died. But he wrote a will that the apartment building that we had the Bible classes in, that money would be given to the deaf work. And he gave it to Maywood Church of Christ to work with the deaf. They were not working. They gave it to Bakersfield. It fell through. If it didn't work there, they told them to send the money here to Sunset to help us to train deaf people. And so we got the money from that apartment here to help us with our work. Not a lot, but it's growing and helping us tremendously. Do you see the providence? I remember telling Cora, my first wife, I said, I'm a preacher for the deaf. I will never own a house. But what I would do, I will buy an insurance worth $12,500 equal to a house. You know, what's the difference? The house value. Insurance, $12,500 through the years. It doesn't grow little by little by little. When my wife was sick and we need to pay bills, I had to sell that insurance, get some $5,000 and pay back. She died in 90. We moved here. I talked to the church when they were going to sell the church house in California. I said, I've been here 20 years. It'd be nice if you could give me $1,000 for every year I was there. That'd be $20,000. I could have a down payment if I moved to another place. And the elders talked to the church, and they agreed and gave me 1/3 part of the house that I lived in that was small, but the value kept going up, inflation. And when I moved here, after a month, I got a check in the mail, $32,000. 1/3 of the house. I took that, made a down payment. Now I own a house. I'm the only preacher I know that moved away. The church gave him enough money to put a down payment on a house. God's providence. Now I live in a house paid for. Thank you, people, Christians in California, for helping me begin. Pepperdine lectureship. The church I worked with, they didn't like to go to the lectureship. I grew up a lectureship, so we need to go. And for many years, every year, you had a lectureship that I was there interpreting all the lessons. I had no other people to help them. But the deaf became interested in workshops and lectures. And the hearing church, who was the president of that school at that time, was Howard White from Nashville, Tennessee. He's the president. He was my co-worker. He preached for the hearing in the Maywood Church, and I was the deaf preacher. I was full-time, and he was the president of the school there. So that relationship, because I moved to California. Small world, how the little deaf preacher could be with the president of the university. But it worked out that way. God uses us in funny ways. You never know. Maybe you've never heard of Sierra Bible Camp, but because of the deaf camp in Arkansas and Alabama, I'm in California, too far away. So I began to take deaf people to Northern California, 600 miles every year, and we take an interpret all day for the whole week, all the lessons, taught and preached. The deaf became interested. I mean, the deaf could participate in the work. After I came back here, I said, I'm too old for deaf work. I'm going to retire. The young people are too fast for me. And then Linda wanted to begin the deaf work here. And so now again, another 20 years involved with the deaf camp in Texas and now in Oklahoma. It's hard to quit the deaf work. Even though I'm old, 84, 83, how do you do work with it? I'm there. helping a little bit. Another thing that changed in California, many intelligent people, many education opportunities. In a school there, Northridge, California, Northridge. They began to have sign language classes for training people to become teachers of the deaf. And they invited all the people in to learn the signs. I got out of the church and associated. I met people all over the world through that class. We decided we need to get professional training as interpreter. Well, I was involved, and we began the first chapter of RID. We were the first one to adopt the name Southern California Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. On the ground floor, I was there. I was not certified at first, but began to learn, and finally became certified. And here in Texas, became certified for a level 4 interpreting for 20 years. Now I'm too old, not fast. The skills, and I'm down, so I don't do that interpreting anymore. But that helped me when I came here to teach sign language and teach about education. But I'm over time. I need to stop. You'll have to read the rest of it in my paper. This time, I got it right. The full paper and both sides are good. I see I'm over 4 minutes. We need to stop. Thank you. Get my paper and read the rest of the story. God bless. We began the deaf group because we would change. Russell went